A few months ago, I had an unsettling feeling. My name is Charlotte Erickson, 58 years old, and I run a small art gallery by the beach in Cedar Ridge. Since my husband David passed away 5 years ago, I've lived a quiet life with my daughter, Lena. We're not rich, but we're comfortable. David's patents and life insurance ensured we didn't have to worry about money. Our house is paid off. Lena's college fund turned into savings, and I've got enough for a comfortable retirement. Lena, 32, is smart and successful in her marketing career. She's always been independent, but despite her success, she still craved one thing: true love. And as a mother, it broke my heart to see her searching for it. Everything started changing when Lena brought home Alexei Vasiliev. He was everything she had dreamed of: handsome, charming, and seemingly perfect. Tall, dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that could make anyone swoon. He drove a shiny BMW, dressed like he stepped out of a magazine, and claimed to work in investment consulting. What that really meant, I quickly learned, was that he helped the wealthy shuffle their money around. The first night I met him, I watched him work the room like a pro. He complimented my pot roast, asked intelligent questions about David's engineering work, and acted genuinely interested in family photos. He even brought me expensive flowers from a high-end florist, not the gas station carnations. "Mrs. Harrison," he said, taking my hand in both of his with that practiced charm that immediately set off alarms in my head. "Lena's told me so much about you. I can see where she gets her strength and grace." Grace. If he only knew my idea of grace was not telling him what I really thought about his oversized charm offensive. But Lena was glowing, so I smiled and played along because that's what mothers do. We hope our instincts are wrong. But deep down, I knew they weren't. Later that night, while Lena went to get dessert, Alexei settled into David's chair as if it was his, casually asking about our financial situation. How was I managing as a widow? Did Lena help with the bills? Had we made any recent investments? I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, but I kept my voice sweet and my answers vague. "We're managing fine, thank you." He smiled, undeterred. "I'm sure you are, but if you ever want to make your money work harder, I'd be happy to review your portfolio. Family rates, of course." Family rates. We'd known each other for 3 hours. After they left, I stood at the kitchen sink, washing dishes, trying to figure out what bothered me about Alexei. On paper, he was everything a mother could want for her daughter: polite, charming, financially secure, but something didn't add up. My instincts were screaming that Alexei wasn't who he claimed to be. The question was, what was he hiding? As the weeks passed, I watched Alexei weave himself deeper into our lives. He was at every family dinner, every community event and holiday celebration, charming everyone in his path. He was the perfect fiancé, helpful, attentive to Lena, and always the center of attention. But every time he spoke, my suspicions grew. There were little inconsistencies in his stories, things that didn't quite add up. During one dinner, as we sat outside, Alexei casually asked me about our family's finances again, but this time the questions felt more pointed. "How much was your husband's life insurance?" He asked as if it were the most casual inquiry. "I don't see how that's your business," I replied, a little sharper than intended. "Just curious. I'm sure Lena's inheritance will be useful for the both of you, especially with everything you've been through." I stared at him, caught off guard. It wasn't just the question, it was the way he asked it, as if he already knew everything. I didn't want to show him any weakness, but my mind was racing. Why was he so fixated on our financials? When Lena wasn't around, I went online and dug into Alexei's background. I found his name listed in a few places, mostly in connections to exclusive financial firms, but there was no concrete proof. No business license, no real professional records, nothing that tied him to anything legitimate. His name wasn't even on LinkedIn. I couldn't find any trace of him in connection with the fancy life he was claiming. But what unsettled me most was his supposed background in finance. He claimed to work for some elite firms, but I couldn't find any verification. He told me he'd attended Yale, but I found no record of him there. His story seemed too well rehearsed, and the holes were getting bigger. I decided to investigate further. I wasn't about to let him pull the wool over my daughter's eyes, not on my watch. One afternoon, I sat Lena down over coffee. "Lena, tell me again about Alexei's background. Are you sure about his work? I mean, you've barely known him for a few months." Lena smiled, slightly defensive. "Mom, I told you, he's brilliant. His clients are high net worth people. He's helping me with some of my investments, and I trust him. You don't need to worry." "I'm not saying I don't trust you, honey, but have you looked into him? I mean, really looked?" I pressed. "I'm not a child, Mom," she snapped, her voice tinged with frustration. "You just don't get it. He's the one. He understands me. I get that you're happy, but I think you're rushing into this. People like Alexei, people who seem perfect, sometimes hide things, big things." But Lena was already shutting me out, and my words weren't getting through. The next step was subtle. I asked my friend Margaret, who had connections in the finance world, to look into Alexei. She called in a few favors from people who had worked in finance for years. I didn't want to believe it, but the more I learned, the more Alexei seemed like a fraud. There were whispers of shady business deals, nothing concrete but enough to make me uneasy. I decided to confront him. It was a rainy Wednesday night when I invited Alexei over for dinner, just the two of us. Lena was out, and I needed to get answers. When he arrived, I could see his usual charm at full force, but this time I wasn't buying it. We sat down over a glass of wine, and I asked, "Alexei, where did you grow up again?" "Connecticut," he replied, his tone casual, almost too casual. "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "I have some friends from Connecticut, and they never mentioned you. They said they didn't know any Vasilievs." He smiled, but his eyes flickered with unease. "It's a small state. You know, everyone knows everyone." "Small state, big network," I muttered, not buying it for a second. I let the silence sit, letting him stew in his own lies. "And about your company, the investment consulting firm, what's the name again?" "Thompson Financial," he said confidently, but the hesitation in his voice made me press on. "Strange," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I did some research. I couldn't find anything linking you to Thompson Financial. No license, no paperwork, no online presence. Nothing." Alexei's smile tightened. "You've been checking up on me." His voice was still smooth, but now I could hear the hint of a threat. "I think you're hiding something, Alexei, and I think it's more than just your business." I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. "I don't know what you're after, but I won't let you use my daughter." His expression faltered for just a moment. I'd hit a nerve, but before I could say more, he stood up abruptly. "You're overreacting, Charlotte. I'm here because I love Lena, and that's all that matters." He turned on his heel and left, but not before flashing me a look that made my blood run cold. As soon as the door shut, I called my private investigator. The noose was tightening. Days passed, and each moment felt like I was waiting for the inevitable storm to hit. I had known Alexei wasn't what he seemed the moment he walked into our lives, but now I had to be careful. I couldn't just expose him without irrefutable proof. Lena was head over heels in love, and any confrontation might push her away. But if I didn't do something soon, she'd be the one left broken and betrayed. I needed to set a trap. But not just any trap, one that would force Alexei into a corner, where his lies would be undeniable. I started by observing him more closely, taking note of every detail. I knew he had a soft spot for luxury, so I fed him subtle hints about a potential investment opportunity that would pique his interest. I casually mentioned that an old family friend had recently passed away, and I might be receiving an inheritance from them. "Nothing huge," I said, "but enough to consider reinvesting." Alexei's eyes lit up at the mention of money, his usual calm demeanor cracking just slightly. "Really? That's interesting," he said, leaning in a little closer, his voice more eager than I'd ever heard it. "What's the value? What's the plan for the money?" "I'm still waiting on the paperwork," I replied nonchalantly. "But a lawyer is handling everything. Once it comes through, I'll have to figure out the best way to use it. I've heard good things about estate planning, but I'll need someone who knows what they are doing." "You know, I could help with that. I have a lot of connections," Alexei offered, his tone now smooth, calculated. I smiled inwardly. I had him. He was already trying to worm his way into managing my non-existent inheritance. I needed more than just interest. I needed him to make the next move, to show his true intentions. The following days, I kept feeding him bits of information, enough to keep him hooked but not enough to expose everything. I spoke more about the inheritance and the plans I supposedly had, but I needed to escalate things. It was time for him to take the bait. I called Patricia, the private investigator who had been helping me all along. "Patricia, I need to confirm something. Can you get your hands on some of Alexei's financial records, just enough to see if there's any history of fraud or shady dealings?" She assured me that she would do everything she could. "I'll have something for you in a couple of days. Be ready to act quickly." As Patricia worked behind the scenes, I continued my subtle manipulation. I'd learned from Alexei's constant interest in Lena's finances, so I decided to plant a seed. Over dinner, I casually dropped a line about an investment opportunity that Lena and I had been considering, something I fabricated from thin air. I needed to see how far Alexei would go to secure control of Lena's inheritance. "Well, that sounds great," he said with a gleam in his eyes. "Maybe we should make sure you don't miss out on it. After all, it's not every day you get an opportunity like this." I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was already picturing the future, his future, with Lena's money in his hands. I just needed him to move in for the kill. A week later, Patricia called with the news. "I've got it," she said. "I found a paper trail that matches your suspicions. His history is more than shady. There are connections to fraudulent activities in multiple states. But I need you to act fast. This guy's good at covering his tracks. If you're going to expose him, it needs to be now." I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just some unlucky con artist. It was a man who had been carefully plotting his way through multiple lives for years. And now he had my daughter in his sights. I set the plan into motion. I contacted a lawyer I knew and asked for his help in preparing a formal complaint. With Patricia's findings, we had the evidence to prove that Alexei was no mere investor. He was a predator, and it was time to expose him before he destroyed everything Lena had worked for. The day came when the trap was finally set. I invited Alexei over for one final dinner, knowing that he'd be there under the pretense of helping me with my so-called inheritance. He was practically salivating at the chance to manipulate me further. "Alexei, I've been thinking," I said as we sat down, my voice calm but firm. "I've decided to take a different route with my finances. You've been helpful, but I need to let go of some of these ideas. I'm not sure I want you managing everything." His expression shifted instantly. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Then he smiled, coldly, almost menacingly. "You sure about that, Charlotte? Because I've already done a lot of work for you. You wouldn't want to risk losing out on all the opportunities I've lined up, would you?" I didn't flinch. "Actually, I'm not too concerned anymore. I've done some research of my own. You see, the only thing I really care about right now is protecting my daughter from people like you." His face went white, and for the first time I saw the mask slip. His true self was starting to emerge. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his voice rising. Before I could respond, I pulled out my phone, showing him the recordings I'd made, along with the proof Patricia had gathered. "You don't think I'd let you get this far without watching you, do you?" I said. Lena deserves better than someone who thinks of her as a paycheck, and I'm done pretending I don't know who you really are. The night had taken an unexpected turn, but now, standing in front of Alexei, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I could see the gears turning in his head, calculating his next move, but I was no longer going to let him control the situation. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the charming, confident facade he wore now shattered. His eyes darted to the door, calculating the chances of making a run for it, but I wasn't going to let him escape this time. This was his reckoning. "You're making a big mistake," Alexei said, his voice low, but there was a hint of panic beneath the cool exterior. I leaned forward, my gaze never leaving his. "I think the real mistake was believing you could manipulate my daughter and me for so long without facing consequences." My words cut through the tension hanging in the air, and I could see him physically flinch. His eyes narrowed, and he straightened up, trying to regain his composure. "You think you've won, don't you? You think a couple of recordings are going to change anything." He laughed bitterly. "You're too late. I've already got everything I need. Your daughter's inheritance, her trust, it's all in my hands." I didn't flinch. "That's where you're wrong, Alexei. You've only been playing the game on borrowed time, and now it's over." His expression faltered for just a moment before he recovered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You really think you can stop me? You think I haven't prepared for this?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I pulled out a stack of papers from my bag and placed them on the table in front of him. The real plan was already in motion. "I've already alerted the authorities, Alexei. The real authorities, not your network of connections," I said, letting the words linger between us. "And they've got everything they need. Your bank accounts, the offshore transfers, and everything you've done to my daughter. All of it is about to be exposed." Alexei's face turned ashen. His bravado cracked, and I could see the moment of realization hit him. This was no longer a game. It was a full-on reckoning. He reached for his phone, no doubt trying to scramble some sort of emergency plan, but before his fingers could touch the screen, the door opened with a sharp knock. 2 officers stepped into the room, their presence commanding and final. The last person Alexei expected to see at this moment, the law. "Mr. Thompson," one of the officers said, his voice calm but firm. "We have a warrant for your arrest. You're under investigation for multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and financial exploitation. Please turn around and put your hands behind your back." Alexei went rigid, his face a mask of disbelief. This is a mistake," he muttered, trying to compose himself. "You don't know what you're doing." I stood up, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing. You've played the perfect game, Alexei, but you forgot one thing. You underestimated me." The officers moved swiftly, placing Alexei's hands behind his back and securing the cuffs. The sight was almost surreal. Watching him, the man who had pretended to be perfect, now reduced to a fraud caught in his own web of lies. "You're making a huge mistake, Mrs. Harrison," Alexei spat as they led him away. "This isn't over. You'll regret this." But I stood my ground, watching him being escorted out, the anger in his voice doing nothing to shake my resolve. I wasn't going to regret this, not for a second. The aftermath. The officers were gone now, and I stood alone in the room. The confrontation was over, but the weight of what had just transpired lingered. I could still feel the tension in the air, and my mind was racing, knowing that this was just the beginning of a long process for Lena and me. I walked over to the window, my gaze drifting to the street outside. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over everything, and for the first time in months, the weight on my shoulders felt lighter. I had done what needed to be done. A moment later, I heard a knock on the door. My heart skipped a beat as I turned around. Lena stepped into the room, her eyes searching my face for answers. "Mom, what just happened? Where did they take him?" Her voice trembled slightly, uncertainty clouding her expression. I walked toward her, taking her hands in mine. "Lena, sweetheart, you're going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay. I just saved you from a lifetime of heartache." Tears welled in her eyes, and for a moment she just stared at me, struggling to comprehend it all. "But how did you know? How did you know what he was doing?" I took a deep breath, knowing it was time to tell her everything. I had my suspicions from the moment he walked into our lives. I watched him, listened, and learned. And when I knew for sure that he wasn't who he said he was, I started investigating. "Everything he told you was a lie, Lena." She collapsed into my arms, sobbing, the weight of the betrayal finally catching up to her. I can't believe I almost married him. How could I have been so blind?" I held her tightly, reassuring her. "You're not blind, Lena. You were in love, and love can make us see things differently. But you're stronger than this, and you're free now." The police had taken Alexei away, and now, in the quiet aftermath, the weight of what had happened began to settle. The room felt empty of him, but also of all the tension he had brought with him. I could hear Lena's soft sobs, muffled by my embrace, but they were no longer the cries of someone who had been defeated. They were the tears of someone who had been freed. "Mom, I don't know how to feel," Lena whispered between her tears, her voice shaky. "I thought I knew him. I trusted him. How could I have been so wrong?" I gently pulled her away from my chest, wiping the tears from her cheeks, and looked her in the eyes. "Sweetheart, you were never wrong for trusting him. You were wronged by him, and that's not your fault." She took a deep breath and nodded, her eyes still clouded with confusion, but I saw the beginnings of understanding in them. "It's just everything seemed so perfect. The way he treated me, the way he was with you and everyone else." I squeezed her hands. "That's how they get in, Lena. They wear the perfect mask. They pretend to be everything you want them to be. But it's all an illusion. He was never the man he said he was." I could see the gears turning in her head. She wasn't just processing the shock anymore. She was starting to process the reality of what had happened. "I know," she said softly. I can't believe I didn't see it." I pulled her close again, hugging her tightly. "It's okay. It wasn't your fault. You're not the one who betrayed yourself. He is. He's the one who built this lie, and now he's going to pay for it." For the next few hours, we didn't say much. I made us some tea, and we sat in silence, allowing the calm to sink in. It felt surreal. A weight had been lifted, but the emotional damage still lingered like a dull ache in my chest. I knew it would take time for Lena to heal fully from this betrayal, but for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope for her future. The next day, the morning after Alexei's arrest, the reality of the situation began to take shape. We hadn't even had time to process everything fully, but the fallout had already begun. The phone rang off the hook. The press, friends, family, and even strangers were all calling, wanting to know what had happened, how it had all gone down. The media had gotten wind of the wedding disaster, and now the story of Alexei's arrest was circulating like wildfire. Sarah, my sister, came by first thing in the morning, her face a mixture of concern and admiration. "I can't believe you did it, Marg," she said, hugging me tightly. "You were right all along." I pulled back and smiled faintly. "It's not about being right, it's about keeping her safe. We're both lucky I didn't trust him." "I'm just glad Lena had you," Sarah said, her voice full of emotion. "I don't know what she'd do without you." I gave her a tired smile. "She'll be okay, we'll all be okay, but it's going to take time." A few days later, the days after the wedding disaster were a blur of police statements, media interviews, and well-meaning but overwhelming support from friends and family. But through all the chaos, Lena and I stuck together, taking it one step at a time. The days were filled with long talks, therapy sessions, and many moments of quiet reflection. We also began looking into the financial recovery process. Although Brad, or rather Alexei, had stolen most of Lena's inheritance, we were fortunate enough to freeze some accounts and recover a portion of the funds. It wasn't everything, but it was something, and it allowed us to begin rebuilding. Lena started the process of reclaiming her life, and I could see the first steps toward her regaining her confidence. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about Lena's emotional well-being. She had trusted someone completely, someone who had used that trust to take advantage of her. That betrayal cut deeper than anything else. One afternoon, Lena and I sat down together to look through some of the wedding photos she had kept. The dress she had dreamed of wearing, the one she had once thought would mark the beginning of her forever, was now a symbol of a broken trust. She stared at the photo of herself in it, her eyes clouded with doubt. "I thought I'd be walking down the aisle with the love of my life," she said softly, her fingers brushing over the image. "Instead, I was walking down into my biggest mistake." I leaned over and kissed her forehead. "You didn't make a mistake, sweetheart. You were deceived. And now that you know the truth, you'll be stronger than ever before." Lena looked at me, her eyes clearer now, less clouded by the shame she had been carrying. "You know, I think I'm ready to move on. Not just from Alexei, but from all the fear and uncertainty I've been holding on to. I want to rebuild. I don't want to let this define me anymore." And for the first time since all of this started, I saw my daughter for who she truly was. A woman who had been knocked down but was rising back up, stronger, wiser, and more aware of her own power. The future. The weeks turned into months, and the process of recovery continued. Lena's trust in people had been shattered, but she had learned valuable lessons about strength and resilience. She went back to therapy. She started dating again cautiously, and she focused on her career. As for me, I found my own sense of healing. I continued working on rebuilding the family finances, but more than that, I began using my experience to help other women. I started speaking at community seminars about love, trust, and the importance of recognizing red flags before it's too late. It wasn't easy, but slowly, the pain of betrayal was replaced with something much stronger, hope. We both knew there would still be moments of doubt, but we also knew we had each other to lean on. And that was enough.